Now that Season 2 of Delta Force has been out for a little bit over a week and a half-ish, I thought I would give my honest review on the season itself, as I've now sunk quite a few hours into Delta Force since its release. And overall, I'd say it's pretty meh. The game as a whole feels worse than prior to Season 2, and I'll explain why in the course of this video. That's arguably a little bit less structured than usual. So we're going to start off with the content that was added in Season 2. Now, new content is great and all, and the map selection at launch was not the best to say the least, but what was delivered in Season 2 feels rushed and unfinished and not properly thought through. So the 3 weapons they released feel alright, I guess, but how they went about the unlock is odd to say the least, with the QJB201 being locked for the first week, unless you got the secret skin for it in Operations, which unlocked the weapon for both modes, which is just odd and seems like an oversight. The maps are also just alright. Knife Edge seems like they tried to go too all out on routes, and it's just a confusing mess, to be completely honest, with multiple levels throughout the entirety of the map. I've played it quite a bit and still consistently stop and look around and go, where in the hell am I on the map? And as for Trainwreck, it's overall fine, but one thing that really annoys me, albeit this might be my OCD speaking, they didn't even bother or notice that the name of the flag on E in Warfare wasn't changed from Chinese to other languages. I realize this is being super nitpicky, but come on, these are like basic things that anybody that's actually QA testing this stuff would be able to see. Seneva is overall fun to play, but could use some tweaking. I commend them for not just coming out with a shield operator that can always have his shield out. I like the idea of it being tied to his quotation mark ultimate ability, and the viewing window being a vulnerable part of the shield, so good job on that. They also added something pretty substantial, so the construction system, you can press 6 on your keyboard to bring out your hammer, and then build fortifications throughout the maps. Now, some of them are really weird, like Shafted, they opened up the map so much, it's great, but now you have certain situations in which you can basically block off a whole tunnel or a whole route by 2 walls of sandbags, and you have actually no way of breaking down the sandbags if you're something like a support or a recon, so you can basically stay trapped in a tunnel because there's no way for you to unbuild a wall while having your hammer out, which just seems again like an oversight. So they open the map, but then they make it so that you can basically block off complete routes from the map, which brings us back to the starting point of people spamming smoke and explosives. So again, it just comes down to, it feels like they didn't QA test much of the changes they were actually bringing to the game. As for the cosmetics, limited time modes and all that, I'm pretty indifferent about those. I haven't tried Hot Zone yet, but plan on doing so shortly. And as for Capture the Flag, I don't think it's actually been released yet, unless I'm just blind and there's too many things in the menus, which arguably there is. They also brought in some weird balance changes, which are somewhat of a head scratcher, most notably buffing Luna, as if she needed a buff, and modifying a lot of how stats affect weapon performance, and decreasing how much stability affects aim punch. The weapons just feel flat out worse to fire than in Season 1. I understand they're attempting to reduce how many weapons or just laser beams at range, but I think the approach needs to be a little bit different. Again, I'm not a game designer, I'm not a game developer, but it just feels worse to play. One thing I really enjoy are the vehicle changes. They drive way better now, and you don't get stuck on every little crevice or Hesco barrier, which is great. I can't speak on the helicopters because I don't fly whatsoever, but overall the vehicles feel a lot more responsive, a lot faster, they're just better and more fun to play with. Now, I still think there needs to be a lot of balance changes in regards to vehicles and where they can actually sit up and stuff like that, because on certain maps like Ascension or Cracked, you have one side that just has a complete advantage because they have the uncap that is on top of a hill, and the vehicle can just back off whenever they don't have active protection on cooldown. And they definitely need to look into how they can better manage people just sitting in uncaps and not participating in the game, because obviously when you're in a vehicle, destroying other vehicles is probably the best way to net you score per minute, which then gives you more merit if you're playing graded. Same thing for snipers that are just sitting in the back lines, which you basically can't touch, most notably on the Ascension. The team that has the mountain base just has a great vantage point for snipers that can basically not be touched, because it is very easy for them to back away whenever they're getting fired at. So balancing needs to be done either in the terms of, well, you get less XP when you get kills from out of bounds or in the uncap, vehicles can't use active protection when they're in the uncap, or they just need to rearrange the layout of the maps so that the uncaps aren't such a pain in the ass to fight against when vehicles are just sitting there and you can't do anything about them unless you have a helicopter pilot that's good enough to go take care of those vehicles. Chances are they're just going to stay there all game and just keep poking at your vehicles, and your team basically won't be able to get anything done. There was also quite a few bugs that I noticed we didn't have when Delta Force launched that were introduced with Season 2, so I played multiple matches on Ascension where one team gains basically 0 tickets despite having the lion's share of the flags in their possession. So again, just weird. There were a lot of adjustments in terms of ticket count for a lot of the maps, which either shortens down the round too much, like Shafted is now 1,000 ticket cap as opposed to 1,300, and Ascension is 750 as opposed to 1,000, so just some odd changes overall, which I'm not really a fan of. Vehicle audio seems beyond borked. Oftentimes they make 0 noise when driving past you, resulting in your untimely death because you simply just didn't hear them driving towards you, which is kind of odd. I have the feeling that there's just too much audio being thrown out that some of it just gets lost. I know other games have had this issue in the past where there's just too much audio that some sounds are just completely cut out. Most notably Apex Legends had this issue, so again, very odd that some vehicles just make 0 noise. And also, I played 2 distinct matches on Trainwreck, one of them where there just wasn't any indicator on how many tickets either side had, nor which flags were in which team's possession. So the HUD UI element on top where it says all the flags on the map and how many tickets are on either side, it just wasn't there. So nobody had a single clue of which team was actually winning at any given time. And then another match, a whole flag was unable to be capped, but only by a singular team, resulting in one team keeping that cap for the entirety of the game. Which is like, okay, what happened here? Was there just a lack of QA? Is this like a one-off situation? I don't know, but again, very odd. The game also seems to run worse overall, with average frame rates being roughly 100 lower than when the game launched. No clue what happened to those frames, and I realized that beyond a certain amount of frames, you can't visibly discern them with your eye, but it still reduces the overall latency. So yeah, I don't know what happened, why the game runs a lot worse. Again, I'm not complaining, I'm still getting average like 250-ish frames per second, and on other systems it can be a lot worse if you're losing all those frames when you're, for example, getting at best 150. If you're losing 100 frames on top of that, you're down to 50 FPS, it can feel pretty bad. So optimization or something needs to be changed in that regard. They also said that they did network and netcode optimization, but I'm getting a lot more unstable servers in which I often get stutter steps and overall jankiness, not to mention increased occurrences of dying behind cover. So I don't know if they changed server provider or whatever it may be, but the servers feel worse and the netcode feels worse overall. Now for a big topic of contention, skill-based matchmaking. Even though the devs say there is no such thing, there is. I constantly get thrown into lobbies with way higher ping than I should despite being in one of the more popular regions in terms of players. It feels really bad also to win a few games only to then be thrown into matches that are already underway on the losing side and for 5+ matches in a row just so SBMM can round off the win rate at 50%. Now, if you don't believe me, just go through your friends list and look at all of their different win rates. Generally speaking, it'll you know, be around 50-ish%, with the outliers being maybe closer to 60 if they're like vehicle players or something, but on average it's between like 45 and 55-ish%. And also pay attention to the players that are in your matches. I find myself constantly playing against the same people because I would imagine they're around my skill level, and it can just get a little old because you're always seeing the same tactics. It's always the same person in the helicopter, it's always the same person taking the tank and camping in the uncap, and nobody else gets to drive that tank because that person's not going to get killed for the entirety of the match. So, you know, just little things that don't keep the game as fresh as it should be, considering it's such a new title. In a combined arms game like Battlefield, the variety of players is really what keeps the game fresh, because you're seeing new tactics, you're seeing these new players come in and doing different things and learning the game, and it just really fosters an environment of every match is different. And with close to 100,000 players playing Delta Force on Steam at any given point, not counting people that just play the game directly from the launcher without having Steam, you really shouldn't be seeing the same players in every single match you play in, and that's my experience. I always see the same people in my matches, and some of them being slightly toxic, which would be nice to not have them in my games every now and then. Now, to cap off this video, I realize that devs are working on bringing Delta Force to other platforms like console and mobile, and that they might be stretched thin. And despite the classification of open beta, let's be real, the game is fully released, as they are throwing out seasons after all. I would just love for them to focus on quality of life features and balancing, even more so than content. Things I think they should prioritize is map balance, simplifying the UI and the menus because they're just a mess, having some system in place to check which maps you played recently so that you can actually experience the new content without needing to queue for AD Knife Edge 24/7. It probably took me 2 days of playing to even get Trainwreck, and some nights I don't even see 2 or 3 of the available maps as it just loads me into the same ones back to back to back, and it can get a little old, especially if it's a map you don't really enjoy. Not to name any, but Ascension. More HUD and UI customization would be highly welcomed as well. Next time you're playing, just take a second, stop, look in a general direction and see how much clutter there is. Mostly on maps that have like few lanes like Threshold, Shafted, Knife Edge and stuff like that. Look at how much junk there is on your HUD at any given time. It can just be very difficult to see players when there's all that clutter around, so more HUD customization would be awesome as it would improve overall visibility and you can actually see what you're playing. So those are just a few of the things that come to mind when I think of quality of life improvements. So yeah, overall, it's a pretty mixed bag for me for Season 2 of Delta Force. Now, I understand the game is free to play, but one can still give constructive criticism on the game in order for them to improve it over time. I'm more than happy to purchase the Battle Pass to support the devs, as I believe they're filling an important gap in the FPS market, but yeah, lots of improvements need to be done in order for the game to be elevated to a standard that is a little bit higher than what it is right now. And looking at my friends list, a lot of them have taken the rose-tinted glasses off and are just not playing the game anymore because of all the things that I mentioned in this video. So that's enough rambling. Let me know your thoughts on Season 2 of Delta Force. How are you feeling with the game right now? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Anything in between? Leave all that in the comment section down below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.